Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and today we had the passing of just an amazing, extraordinary human being, Miss Maya Angelou. And I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what Maya Angelou means to all of us, especially to women. And I thought a great person to talk to about this would be Dr. Monikah Ogando. Dr. Monikah Ogando, she is the CEO of a company called CEO Mastery, and she's also putting on a series of conferences for women that relate to business, executives, business owners, etc. And her website is flourishlive.com, and we'll talk about more of that in a second. But first, I want to ask Monikah, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you.
Good, good. And I'm going to call you Dr. Ogando most of the time.
Sure.
I don't want to disrespect you by calling you by your first name. I don't mind when people call me Boyce, but I've had people say, well, Boyce, when you were on TV, they called you by your first name. Don't you feel disrespected? So that let me know that maybe some people don't like this. So I apologize, Dr. Ogando.
Oh, that's okay. I appreciate the sensibility.
Absolutely. It's sincere. Okay, so Maya Angelou. Before I ask you how what she meant to you, I'll say that one of the things that really stuck out to me about her was how she literally started from some really difficult circumstances, to kind of become this iconic figure. And she reminded me a little bit of my mom because she was a 17-year-old single mother, like my mother was a 17-year-old single mother. She, didn't really, at that time, probably didn't appear to be anybody who was going to become everything she became. And it got to a point where she was just so special that, she just couldn't be replaced. She was just kind of in a space of her own. Now, what did Maya kind of mean to you, particularly as a woman or as a person who has done the great things you've done? I mean, how does Maya inspire your life?
One of the things that I learned from very young was to study the greats, especially when they were still living. And so as a woman when I came to this country, I was very young. So I wanted to imbue myself in the American culture and what that meant. And not just American overall, but also the American culture for what it meant for immigrants and what it meant for people that looked like me, brown girls. And so there weren't that many around that spoke to my academic ambitions, right? So there were plenty of models, plenty of actresses, plenty of folks that were in the performing arts, etc. But that has never called to me as much as the academic. And so here's Dr. Maya Angelou, and you have to call her Dr. Maya Angelou. She's received over 30 honorary doctorate degrees.
I know, right?
She's got us all beat.
And never went to college.
Right.
But yet she speaks
and
6
taught,
languages.
And taught at college for over 30 years. So the conversation for me was about who's out there that is as intelligent as she is, well spoken, as much of an agitator and an activist as she is a mother and a sister and a daughter, and someone who's also graceful and elegant and beautiful in her own right. And I saw Maya Angelou as that for a lot of reasons. She herself was a performing artist in her own right. She did a lot of work in theater, in doing plays and movies and television shows, and of course she was better known as a poet and as a writer, as an author. But I think she also grew as the conscience of America. And so there were a lot of things that we always talk about in brown cultures. We have Big Mama, right? So we always have this grandmotherly in some the archetype is known as the crone, right? So you have Isis in Egyptology, or you have Kali, or you have the crone, which is just like this older feminine energy of been there, done that, still love you, and we'll call it like it is, and still love you. And I think Dr. Angelou was like that for American conscience. Specifically for me, how do you fully embody intelligence and elegance, beauty and brains, and still speak your piece, speak your mind, without minimizing anyone else, without engaging in low blows and petty arguments, etc., but elevating not only the consciousness of people, but also the conversation as you're having it. And so for me, she was the epitome of all that. I loved the mentorship that she shared with so many women that came to her, including Oprah, whom a lot of people consider Oprah to be an amazing, icon in her own right. And so the icon to the icons, Dr. Maya Angelou was the icon to the icon, the mentors to the mentors. So I really deeply appreciated how she lived her life, not just what she represented, but who she was as a woman, as a mother, and she'll be greatly missed.
Yeah, I think that Maya, when you look at her life, and you sort of see this as this model of elegance, brilliance, just she had such a presence about her, and and it was it's just something that where you can't really compare it to anybody else. I think, one thing that I think we can learn from kind of looking at her life is, just, how we can all sort of create a positive trajectory on our life by kind of having faith that the future will not always be the same as the present. I'm most inspired not so much by the big shot Maya Angelou that I saw on TV, but more so, from that young woman who dropped out of school at 14. She had a lot of different occupations. She was a fry cook. She says she was a prostitute, a nightclub dancer, and performer. But then she moved into stage, and she was part of the cast for Porgy and Bess. And then she became a civil rights activist. And I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings came out when she was about 31 years old, which kind of elevated her to this critical acclaim that she was able to build on for the rest of her career. And it's in a way, I guess it reminds me, the closest thing I can think of in terms of recent passings that have affected me might be Dr. Dorothy Height. I kind of put them in the same category. Just these women that have just gone through so much, and also I think maybe what also touches me about Dr. Angelou's passing is it makes me think about my grandmother, who died about a year ago, and I am pausing now because I literally felt a tear coming. I started thinking about my grandmother, and it's strange. It's like, it's so weird. The emotion just sort of came out of nowhere, but she meant so much, in terms of the kind of wisdom and love that a grandmother gives you, and I always say that she was my first finance professor. My PhD was in finance, but I learned things from my grandmother in finance, among many other areas. But I learned things from her that I literally just kept with me and kept repeating. No matter how much education I had, it was like, well, wait a minute. What my grandmother told me about money actually applies very well. Even when I'm looking at the most advanced, complex theories of how money works, I'm like, yeah, but it all kind of goes back to what my grandma said, and then you see these older women with this amazing strength, and I think about how my grandmother, when she was 15, she had her first child, and she was a single mother from the age of, I think she was married for a couple years and got divorced, and then she was a single mom from 17 till the end, never got remarried or anything, and all through those years she never had to borrow money from anybody. Always had perfect credit, even though she never made more than $23,000 a year. She always had tons of money in the bank. When she died, all of her arrangements were made, even down to the color of her dress. We didn't have to have a fundraiser to pay for her, to bury her or anything. And I guess I link. I guess the closest thing I can connect when I think about Maya is is thinking about my grandmother, and so maybe that's what she was to all of us, just kind of this wonderful grandmother figure. And it's kind of sad to see her go.
I do. And as someone who, I grew up only having one grandparent. Both of my father's parents died when he was young, so I never got to meet them. And my mom's father died when she was a toddler as well. So when I came along, there was only one grandparent. In this case, my mother's mother. And so for me, the grandmotherly role is very cherished, and it's. I loved how candid Dr. Maya Angelou has always been about her life, and I think in a time and in a world where we try to encapsulate the essence of a woman with labels and roles. Somebody's better known for being a mother to their children, or for being a professional, or for being an actress or a model, but just that. Maya Angelou reminds us that as human beings go, women are multifaceted, and that the strength and the value that women have in this culture isn't so much in the smoothness of our face, but it's in the strength of our character. It's in the contribution that we are to the people that we love. And we say that most commonly about our grandmothers, but it is not just grandmothers who fulfill that role in everybody's life.
One thing that's so interesting in terms of how she was shaped. It's telling, I think, about the experience of African Americans in this country, that so many of our parents and grandparents, when they talk about, and so many children to this day, when they talk about their childhoods, a lot of the memories are just so tragic, so traumatic. When you look at Maya, and her parents got divorced when she was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and then she's molested when she's 8 by her mother's boyfriend, and I think about, to this day in America, I know I know young girls who've been molested by their mother's boyfriends, because they've we got so many single parents in the black community, and I just try to, and maybe as a psychologist, maybe you can chime in on this a little bit, but when I think about what shapes Maya, when I think about what shapes anybody, I look at their root. What happened to you before the age of 12? And when I look at her story, it's just scary sad. I mean, even she even lived during the Depression, which we know that it was triply bad for black people. And to overcome all of that and healthy and whole on some level, I think is an amazing accomplishment in itself. But I wonder just how that plays a role in terms of the kinds of things she writes about, how she deals with the world once she is in power, once she's a powerful woman and no longer kind of being sort of victimized, I guess, by the things around her. In fact, she was mute for 5 years after she was raped by her mother's boyfriend, and I think the guy was killed by some of her uncles. And which I don't applaud that, killing anybody, but I do like the idea of men protecting our children, and I think that's another thing I get out of that story, is that it's I wonder when we're going to have a day in our community where children are not so vulnerable, where we don't sort of leave them exposed like that, where those horrible things can happen to them. So please tell me, as a psychologist, when you see how she evolved and what she went through and the trauma she experienced and how this shaped the things she wrote and the woman she became, what comes to mind for you first?
It'll probably surprise you, but what comes to mind is the story of the Buddha, because the Buddha was born into privilege and was born into all of the things that we think is ideal for a child to grow up into, protected. He was the child of a king, and he was protected, and his father didn't want him exposed to poverty or to tragedy or to any of the things that we also want to protect our children from. And yet, he felt as though he was missing something, that he was disconnected from humanity because he was not exposed to the dark underbelly of what humanity looks like. And so when he was of age, he left everything behind so that he can go explore and learn it for himself. And Maya Angelou reminds me of that. She reminds me of the wisdom that children have. I mean, we're talking about in 1928. It's not like she, when you're a child, you're pretty much beholden to whoever's your caretaker, whether it be parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, whatever the case may be. In her case, she had many caretakers because she was shuffled around a lot with her brother. But even what she made up about those tragic things that happened in her childhood were very self-defining and empowering. To think that because I spoke up about what happened to me, someone's life was at stake. I'm that powerful.
The power of words just because sort of take it to the extreme.
Yeah, she wasn't mute because something tragic happened to her vocal cord. She was mute because she refused to speak. And so there's this theme of choice and a theme of self-defined identity that is trickling even starting from her childhood and all the way to her death. I mean, her very last tweet was, if you get quiet enough to listen to yourself, you might even listen to the voice of God. I'm paraphrasing it, but even her last public message to the world was about being self-identified.
Mm.
And it's something that I think colored who she was from beginning to end. And that's why I think it is so, she's such a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. You know what, we want to protect our children from what we perceive as tragedy, from what we perceive as the evils of the world. But it is that it's that grit that has us be resilient, that has us be creative, that has us be compassionate when we face other people who face similar tragedies or similar, you know, bad things that may happen to them. And so I don't see it as, you know, Maya Angelou was victimized. I think it was for her specifically and for the human experience in general. Whenever we go through hard times, whenever we go through tragedies, whenever we go through things like that, we are circling up the very training of compassion and strength and character that will take us throughout our lives. So I see it a bit differently.
No, I think that's perfect. Well, you know, that gives me a lot of insight. It's funny. You and I've done a few interviews like this, and I enjoy talking to you. People should know that this is a smart woman. She's got 2 PhDs, not 1, 2, and you always have this great insight on things, and you express it so well. And you know, before I close out, I want to ask you: can you tell us a little about your event coming up, Flourish Live? People can go to flourishlive.com to find out more. But tell us in your words, you know, you, like similar to the great Miss Maya, are seeking to empower women through business and economic empowerment, etc. Tell us about Flourish Live and what you plan to do.
Well, you know, there are a lot of women who are in that treadmill of life, right? Career accomplishment and their personal development, their own personal growth, their civic engagement, and their contribution that they make for their communities, and to make sure that the world that they leave behind is better for their children and grandchildren as well. And so Flourish was designed by myself and my partner in this amazing venture, Dr. Rachel Talton, who's an award-winning CEO in her own right. And the conversation, it started off as a conversation, and it started off really about how do we create a space where women who have already achieved, who are already well learned, who are already up on their game, so to speak, you know, there's got to be a place where we can speak about these concerns, and not in competition with each other, and not to outshine one another, but really to create a collaborative effort. So that we can take that on in our own lives, in our own careers, with our own families. And when we come together collectively, we create a critical mass that then when we go away, you know, we have all been part of conferences or workshops that it's just, I mean, you're lit up when you're in there, right? And then you fly home, and then now maybe you're in front of your desk for Tuesday morning, you're like, now what? So Flourish endeavors to give you the answer to that, to give you the answer to the now what. So what's the Flourish action plan that's going to happen now that you've been empowered and motivated, and you've reconnected to your vision for your life and for your career and for the footprint and the legacy that you want to leave behind? Now what? What do you do the Tuesday after? And what do you do the month after? What do you do 90 days after? You know, so we break that down in a way that people can actually use. And it's going to be amazing. We have a U.S. conference tour, 3 different cities. Washington, D.C. will be July 28th. Atlanta, Georgia will be July 25th. And Cleveland, Ohio will be August 29th. And then that all culminates in a 3-day high-end executive retreat in Fort Lauderdale. And so that'll be September 26th to the 28th. And so I encourage everybody that you know who is a leader in her own right, and who wants to connect with other leaders and really elevate the conversation, just like Dr. Maya Angelou has done for all of her life, to go to flourishlive.com, get registered, because spots are limited, so we want to make sure that you get served.
Well, I love it. I love it. Connecting to your dream and then executing an action plan to make that dream come true. I mean, you know, it's you know, really getting anything you want in life, I think, is a pretty simple process a lot of times. Just a matter of figuring out the complex psychological engineering necessary to get yourself to do it every day. And I know personally, when you talked about that, you use that word connect. You know, and I find that connecting to my dreams means also connecting my day-to-day activities to my long-term goal. You
Yes.
know, so that means that, so that means if I'm connected to what I need to do every day, then I'm going to be connected to my long-term goal, which means my life will eventually flourish and become a manifestation of everything I do on a day-to-day basis, right? So, I guess I really kind of stuck. I connected to what you said about connecting, because it's easy to get disconnected or distracted, and when that happens, you got to reconnect. And I find also that the connection part, sometimes it's easy. Sometimes in my life, I'm always connected with my day-to-day um, to-do list, or the things I need to do every day to be the man that I want to be, right?
Hmm.
But then some days I find myself constantly forcing myself to reconnect over and over again, almost like an internet connection where you got to keep rebooting, and I'm talking about several times a day sometimes, and so I think everybody has their own unique process, and it seems to me that you guys do a great job of bringing that together for people. And I think also the added benefit that I love is that you're a psychologist. So, you have the keys to the universe, which, I mean, the human mind is very powerful. It can create,
That's spirit.
yeah, it can
You know,
create the worst reality or the greatest. I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say that you bring up a good point because we are the women that are coming to Flourish Live are from all walks of life. We have corporate executives, we have entrepreneurs, we have people in academia and nonprofit and government sectors, and so what they all have in common isn't so much their vertical silos, but it's much more that they have a position of leadership and a position of influence, and they want to do something with it besides just hold a title. It's like, you get to the top of the ladder, and it's this all there is. There's got to be something more to my life than just holding a position. I want to do something with this. I want my life to mean something. And so the transcendental step after success is significance, and that's what we're talking about in Flourish Life.
So you're talking about, are you talking about self-actualization? Maslow's hierarchy kind of thing?
Yes, but it's much bigger than self-actualization because when you have reached that for yourself, then you begin looking outside and you begin to think about the impact and the influence that you have on other people. And then it's about actualizing the world. It's not just self-actualization, it's about impact and legacy.
Hmm. Well, I love it. Impact and legacy. And since I've been a physics geek lately, when we use that, another word I'm connecting to now is impact.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I say on a regular basis is that, one simple law of physics is that force equals mass times acceleration. So to me, the analogy is that, your force is your impact on the world. Whether people know that you lived and died, or if they know that you were just some person who had a big car or a big house and a fancy car, and then didn't do anything for anyone other than yourself. So force is your impact. Your mass is, your education, your power, your wealth, your resources, all the things that you have that make you feel like you're a big shot, right? Because there are a lot of big shots out here, that, some have a lot of impact, some don't. And then the acceleration is, I think your courage, your vision, your focus, your tenacity, your willingness to kind of put it on the line to make something happen, for somebody other than yourself. And I find that if you look at that equation, it's multiplicative, and anything multiplied by zero is going to be zero. So that means that if you have all the mass in the world and you are afraid to accelerate, then you will have no force, which means you will have no impact. Which to me is kind of depressing because it means you will live and you will die and no one will know that you are ever here. No one will care. So I love it. Teaching people to have impact. That's a beautiful thing. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Ogando. I truly appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for checking us out at Financial Juneteenth, where we encourage economic empowerment through financial literacy, entrepreneurship, and combating workplace discrimination. I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins. This is Dr. Monikah Ogando. Please go to flourishlive.com. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. And rest in peace, Sister Maya. We love ya.
I love you.
Bye-bye.